Hello and welcome back to Are You Experienced, the podcast all about the business of experiences. I'm delighted to be joined this week by the wonderful Alicia Yaffe. Alicia is the co-founder and CEO of Fascination Street Partners and co-creator of their flagship property, The Living Album Experience. It's a fascinating piece of work, which I will let Alicia tell you all about. But this is a really, really interesting conversation for me personally. It's all about the impact of the experience economy on the music industry and where that's headed. But we get into kind of more broad reflections on life and the ups and downs of starting a business. So without further ado, on with the show. Alicia, hello.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Welcome to Are You Experienced? We're at the opposite end of each other's day, of course, so the energy levels might take some matching up, but hopefully we'll get there. So let's start at the beginning. I'm interested in hearing that you kind of walked away from my dream job, which is sort of managing some of the most iconic sort of music catalogues in the world. So let's go all the way up to that point, and then we'll dive into the Living Album Experience from there.
Amazing. So I grew up, this is going to sound really, really cheesy, but it still holds true, believing that rock and roll can change the world. I grew up hearing stories about, X-rays that smuggle in vinyl beyond the Iron Curtain. There was a great story about the CIA more recently launching an American Idol style show in Somalia, broadcasting from Mogadishu to help fight extremism. And the stories about Live Aid. I went to the Tibetan Freedom Concert in 1998, so I was fully bought into the idea that music can motivate people to action on a grand level and on a personal level. I have my own experiences being a slightly awkward, slightly dorky person, finding those albums that made me feel understood. So from a rather young age, when I learned that the NHL generally does not hire female trainers, and the PWHL just launched in the last 2 years, but when I realized I was probably not going to be in the NHL as a support trainer at some level, I was very, very focused on joining the music industry. And I would have loved to produce and promote the big concerts, that have grown into Coachella that I grew up going to. Shout out HF Festival in the DMV area. But it turns out that I also have a very healthy relationship with sleep.
Right.
So being a promoter was not in my future. And I moved out to LA right after I graduated college, and I got a job as an assistant in a management firm that was working with up and coming artists, including Unwritten Law, which was a band that I had been a huge fan of, starting with their 1998 Black album. I was there for a couple of years, and then in 2006 went to a company called Rocket Science, which was one of the early label services companies. We were ahead of the curve in that way. At the time, it was us and a company called 30 Tigers, which still exists. And, the Napster era had taken over. None of the monetized streamers had really started yet. And everybody was trying to figure out how to sort of save the recorded music business while empowering artists. So Rocket Science was right in that wave where we acted as a full label for smaller indie labels when they were in cycle, so they didn't have to keep on a full-time staff. And we did several joint ventures with artists so that they could keep their rights. And I did that for about 4.5 years, and then launched a company called the Spellbound Group, which was a holistic digital marketing company and social media content development company. And my first 4 clients were the clients of a man named Jeff Jampol, who I had worked with at Rocket Science. At the time, he was managing a band called Infected Mushroom, which are an Israeli psytrance band. Coincidentally, I don't know if you noticed when we were at Ministry of Sound last month, but they are celebrating their 30th anniversary at Ministry of Sound this
No
month.
way.
And I worked on a record called The Legend of the Black Shawarma. Jeff and I developed a relationship. He really invented is a strong word, but led the way into the new industry of legacy management. Prior to Jampol starting his company, Jampol Artist Management, most estates were managed by lawyers, right? And they were busy protecting rights, but not really growing the brands.
Mm.
And Jeff was mentored by a man named Danny Sugarman, who had been working with the Doors since he was 12 years old. And then when he grew up, was managing, the Doors in the 90s until his death in 2005. Jeff took over, and Jeff realized that these icons were brands in a more traditional sense that could be grown and protected. And he went out and signed Janis Joplin, Rick James, and Peter Tosh,
Uh-huh.
and really grew this legacy management business into this valuable asset class that inspired the Shamrocks and the KKRs and the Primary Waves to get into the business, 10 years later. So when I left rocket science and I started the Spellbound Group, my first four clients were handling um, the social media content development and community management for the Doors, Janis Joplin, Rick James, and Peter Tosh. And then in early 2011, the Michael Jackson estate hired Jeff as a consultant, and hired me to be the community manager. So I was actually the community manager for Michael Jackson's estate for 10 years as well. But because my background was in management, and boundaries are not my favorite thing, I kept offering sort of strategic ideas to Jeff beyond my role as the community manager and the social media content developer. And finally, in 2016, he was like, "Why don't you just come be a manager for me?" And I said, "Okay, been waiting for you to ask." And I hired an amazing woman named Rose Campbell to run the Spellbound Group full time. I jumped over and became a manager at Jampol Artist Management. And so all in all, I was on the Jampol Artist Management team, both as the community manager and then as the head of special projects and day to day on the Doors, Janis, Ramones, Otis Redding, and several other artists, Jefferson Airplane, for 12 years. And it was while we were there that we were looking for ways to authentically introduce our clients' music to new audiences. And the general feeling is that you have five levers to pull to introduce an artist to the next generation: new releases, biopics, documentaries, um, musical theater, and books.
Mm.
And I went to Meow Wolf for the first time in early 2018 and thought to myself, there are narratives baked into every great album, not necessarily concept albums, but there are characters and there are stories and there are these world building endeavors that allow you to feel seen in the
Mm.
context of a song. And I wanted to build that for our artists, partly because the majority of an artist's income at any level of their career is going to come from tickets and t-shirts, right? Especially now that streaming is a volume-based game. And at the time, vinyl hadn't experienced the resurgence that it is now. And we were really looking for ways to generate more income and ensure that these artists' legacies connected with the next generation. We didn't have to do anything to the music, but present it in the right context, right? Because we know we have decades of evidence that when somebody hears Janis or somebody hears Otis, that song is going
Mm.
to move them. We just need to make sure they find it in a way that they're open to hearing it, as opposed to, "Oh, that's my mom's music. Oh, that's, somebody else's music." We want each generation to feel like it's their own. And we thought building, a Meow Wolf for music would be an incredible way to introduce fans on their own terms to these iconic albums and these iconic songs without trading on other people's nostalgia, and not as a replacement for any of those sort of like five levers, but as a
Mm.
new form of revenue that would allow our clients at the time to get ticketing revenue without having the ability to tour and without necessarily trying to do holograms, or otherwise, hint at everything they were as humans and as performers, and
Yeah.
shift some of the fervor onto the art. So that is how I first started. This was 2018. We started developing the idea, and as managers, your job is to hire the right people to serve your clients. It's not necessarily to do this stuff yourself. So I started going out and meeting people in the industry. In 2020, we had some conversations that we thought were going to uh, allow our first experience to proceed to full development. It was around Janis Joplin and Big Brother and the holding company's Cheap Thrills, and then the pandemic hit. And I
Yeah.
left Jample Artist Management to take a job as the SVP of Creative Marketing at Warner Music Global Catalog, but really Rhino Entertainment, which is a US based
Wow.
label, and was there for the last 5 years and did some really interesting events and some really interesting digital experiences. And as my fiance and I like to say, I graduated in October, and we decided it is time to really put our effort towards bringing music-based, location-based experiences to the forefront. And the market's caught up with us. When we started talking about it and we were trying to explain it to people, mostly in the music industry, because that's where our relationships were, we got a lot of blank stares or I don't understand.
Yeah.
And now we can, especially this year, we can point to House of Kong, we can point to Radiohead Motion Picture House, we can point to what Billie Eilish did in 2019 to launch um, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? And the lights have started to come on. We can point to Masquerade. We can point to Phantom Peak. Everybody obviously defaults to ABBA, but most brands, for lack of a better term, are not going to be able to sustain a
Yeah.
$150 million
No,
de- capex
it's amazing that
to
happened now, to be
produce.
honest.
It's incredible that it happened. It's such a feat. And I'm so excited for that whole Pop House team. We think there's an opportunity for a more sustainable market based
Yeah.
on IP in general, but also music-based IP that casts the fan in the world and gives them agency without interfering with whatever emotional relationship they might already have with music, and hopefully enhancing it, expanding it, and creating these opportunities for kids who have never heard these records to have their minds completely blown.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you're thinking about it at the album level rather than the artist level, right?
Yeah.
And you said that the experience industry has kind of caught up, the market's caught up. What do you think about the people's appetite for albums? Because I think the conventional wisdom is that nobody listens to albums anymore, right? But then you're seeing these big spikes in vinyl sales and things like that. So how do you think about that? The
Yeah.
year of the album in 2026.
Well, I think trend-wise, right now, we are seeing a return to album. We are seeing a return to narrative. We are seeing a return to an appreciation for the artist's perspective. Ray just announced this week that her new album, This Music May Contain Hope, hit 1 billion streams. And I think that's a huge endorsement for the album overall. It's led by the single "Where Is My Husband?", but there is a good consistent stream count across
Mm.
the board, and that's just on Spotify, right? Like, that doesn't even take into account Apple Music, Qobuz, whatever, and a lot of younger generations are rejecting digital everything and screen everything. They are buying the records. And yes, a lot of kids are buying records and they do not have anything to listen to them on. But I think, with entry level turntables, that people are finding more. I think that they're using second generation turntables from their parents, from their grandparents, and it still indicates a desire to dive deeper into the world that the artist is building. So, yeah, conventional wisdom is you want to focus on the artist and the artist brand. I think our industry has missed an opportunity by heavily focusing on the artist brand over the art itself. And I think it is really dangerous for both the artists and the fans. Um, for a few reasons. One, it exhausts our artists because it demands a constant stream of content over art to serve the, insatiable maw of the internet. And I think that we are making art disposable and commodified, and I think that is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um, I have been in situations when I was working with artists who are still alive where fan fervor is really scary.
Mm,
And I think that if we as an industry can help transfer some of that fervor back onto the art, the way that I'm going to get flack for saying this, but like most Harry Potter fans do not care about J.K. Rowling. And she's a really problematic person. But the world that she created in Harry Potter has done such a net good in the world. There are scientific studies that prove that kids who read the Harry Potter series grow up more empathetic and more inclusive and more accepting than
mm,
kids who don't, right? And is it the only book series to do that? No, but it is, arguably the biggest. And I think it would be a net loss for society to cancel the wizarding world
mm.
because J.K. Rowling is not a good person, and that applies even more to artists. The industry thrives on deifying these people,
Mm,
but at the end of the day, they're people that want to be able to create art. And Harry Styles has spoken to this, and Ray has spoken to this, and you've seen all of these, stories throughout the years of artists just expressing this desire to create, but not to be wholly consumed themselves
yeah.
by fans. And I think um, Beyonce does this really, really, really well. I've had some really compelling arguments with, or not compelling, but robust arguments with friends of mine who want more from Beyonce, and they feel like she's used the word inauthentic. I've heard the word inaccessible. And I'm like, guys, why do we deserve anything
Yeah.
from her besides what she wants to present as her artistic output? And I think that she has done a really wonderful job of creating this world that serves the fans, that people feel really connected with, that people feel really seen inside, that people want to interact with and participate with without um, depleting herself. And she's in control. She doesn't have a manager. She is the CEO of, you know, Park Avenue or I forget what her company's called, but of Beyonce Enterprises or whatever. And I think that more artists deserve that. And I think that, Steve Jobs always did a great job of saying, I'm not responding to the market. I'm giving the people what they don't even know they want yet. And
Yeah.
I think that we can do that because a lot of artists put out a lot of great albums, a lot of great collections of music. In the 90s, we had albums with a lot of filler. I'm not gonna pretend like it was all great at the time, but I think we can create the environment where artists are delivering that, and fans can dive into that and experience the world. And we just have to set it up rather than
Yeah.
reacting to streaming as the arbiter. I mean, not to go too much off course, but the fact that the streaming companies are the most powerful companies in the music industry is highly problematic for the whole industry,
It
not to
is.
mention the product that we sell.
It's kind of a case the same as it ever was, right? Because you got streaming today. I randomly watched, there's a Frank Zappa interview from 1984 that I saw the other day where he's basically saying everything you just said, but about
Yep.
MTV.
Yep.
And it's
Yeah.
kind of like, I'm not interested in people are effectively creating 4-minute commercials to sell a product, and that's what he sort of thought of MTV and all this kind of stuff. It's funny that it's kind of so sort of cyclical.
Yes.
But
And
yeah,
by the way, I'm a streaming subscriber. I love having the world of music at my fingertips, but I also buy vinyl. I also buy
yeah, yeah,
tickets.
yeah,
You know, there's a whole flywheel that I think experiential based on music has an opportunity in. And again, like, Radiohead doesn't tour that often. So the fact that Motion Picture House can go on tour without them and people can step into the world that they created through Kid A and Amnesiac is magical, and it serves fan demand and it serves the band's needs as people and as creators.
yeah.
That's amazing.
But I'd say, yeah, there's something in that because it is about it's getting closer to the art, not the artist. I think there's something that takeaway is really important because it's not the same as going to see it. It's a totally different um to going and watch Radiohead perform the songs. That's about
Totally.
Radiohead. This is about just stepping into the art itself, which is really interesting, and particularly in the context of again, it always comes back to money eventually. Legacy music catalogs are huge business right now.
Massive.
Like
Yeah.
Bruce Springsteen selling his catalog for 500 million. I think Queen just sold theirs for 1 billion,
Mhm.
and it's like this is insane money. So that the people who've bought those catalogs are going to have to generate a return somehow, and so
Absolutely.
it feels like the more ways there are to do that, that can only be a good thing from an investment perspective as well.
Absolutely. And it gives you more opportunities to provide fans a point of entry. There is, to me, no greater communal experience than going to a live concert, right? And again, the artist is right there. You get to hear the songs, your heartbeat is syncing with the people around you, like, and it's just magical, right? And it's expensive. And there's billions of people that do not live near the major cities or the secondary or tertiary cities where tours go. So this could open up a whole new market at a more affordable price point, for fans to have a point of entry for that live communal experience with other people around the art that may not get the opportunity to go to live shows, or they can do this and then go to the show when it comes through town. It's an expansion of the market, not a substitution.
Brilliant. So we've kind of jumped a little bit ahead. Tell us what the living living album experience actually is, and kind of I think people have kind of gleaned it from that conversation, which was fantastic. But give us like the official sort of spiel on kind of what it is.
Absolutely. So the living album experience is designed to allow fans to step into the world of their favorite albums. It's designed to be a ticketed touring, multi-room, immersive experience, and I'm using the word immersive in the way that I want the experience to be dynamic and responsive to the people who are traversing through it, so that every time they come, they can discover something new, they can hear something new, they can create a slightly different experience. That is personalized and participatory while also keeping the artist's vision sort of intact, right? So it's the same mechanisms that like Roblox is providing for their online music experiences, but more focused on the narratives and the characters that are already baked in to the albums, on the touch points that fans are familiar with. So like if we were to build, and we are not currently building this, but I'm just throwing it out there, a living album experience on Duran Duran's Rio, they get to run through the jungle that is featured in the Hungry Like the Wolf video. They would get to be on the yacht that's featured in the Rio video. So there would be those familiar touch points, and then they get to imagine themselves as the characters in those settings, right? And there's a slight questing element, but obviously each one of these will be developed in partnership with the artists and their and or their management or their rights holders. And so they'll all be slightly different. But the general idea is that you have a beautiful spatially designed audio environment, you have a promenade style experience, and you are traversing through the album in the order that the artist intended, with opportunities to skip around once you understand why the sequencing happened in the way that it did. So that is what the living album experience will be. And no, we do not have one open yet. Yes, they are in development.
That's great. Yeah. No, I mean, there's you're clearly. I mean, you're clearly the person or the people you and Jesse to do it, and you clearly have very high conviction in the power of it because you kind of you've seen you've managed these estates, and more importantly you've jumped ship and kind of gone all in on it.
Yeah.
So that's great. What was the trigger that made you kind of actually say, right, we need to kind of go and start doing this as our full time?
Do you want the honest answer?
Yeah.
I got laid off.
Oh, right.
I would love to say that I was brave enough to just say, "All right, we're going out on our own."
Yeah.
But the truth is, I loved my job at Warner,
Yeah.
and they announced $310 million or something like that um, in operational cuts, and my salary was part of that.
I see. Right. Okay. Well, so still high
You
conviction,
know.
but not maybe
Yeah,
not.
yeah, but that being said, it was, it's a gift, and, we joke about it because this was my first corporate rodeo, this was my first layoff situation, and I asked my boss, after he told me that I believe the words he used were, "I was elected for the reduction in force program." Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was verbatim, and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that is some spin,
That's like
you know?
gymnastics.
Um, yeah, but I had a really good relationship with them. I can prove the impact of the work that I did, but I like to keep learning. I always want to perform my best, and I asked him what he wishes I had done differently. And at first he said he'd get back to me. And then a little bit later in the conversation, he said, "You know what? Nothing." He goes, "You did exactly what I brought in here to do. And I just can't afford to keep you and make my numbers work."
Yeah.
And I was like, and intellectually, that layoffs are not related to performance,
Yeah.
but emotionally, it's a really bizarre feeling to know that you can deliver on the promise of your position
Yeah.
and still be found unneeded. You know?
100%.
Um,
And I
yeah.
think that's a kind of an unwritten accord that's really fractured in the last, well, since COVID, really, right? Because the corporate world, that was sort of the deal, right? You kind of, this job security was the kind of almost a given, right? Um, and then yeah, obviously a lot of companies overhired through COVID and then tried to kind of unwind some of that. And now you're still having companies doing that and claiming AI efficiencies and all that kind of stuff when really it's still kind of unwinding some of the other stuff. But I suppose that's as at least that is a neat and tidy a signal, I suppose, as you can get that it's time to, kind of, if you can be
Absolutely.
if you can be feel like you're in the place that you need to be, performing well, and like you say, and still kind of be not surplus to requirements, but still not be a solvable math
Mhm.
problem within a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's time to paddle your own
To move
canoe.
on. 100%. And that's the other thing. I mean, I'm so grateful for the experience that I had there. I'm grateful for everything that I learned there. I got to work with, bands and artists that I've been fans of my entire life. You know,
Yeah.
it's wonderful, and um, I don't belong in a corporate environment. You know,
Me neither.
yeah. I mean, some people really know how to navigate that and stay within the lanes. I never excelled at that, and it feels also like that moment. Have you ever been skydiving?
I haven't. I've been bungee jumping, but
Okay, so maybe the same. I love skydiving. But there's this moment like you are all suited up. I've only been tandem. I do not have my skydiving license, but I've been 5 times. And you go up in the plane and you're excited and you're excited and you're excited. And then the plane hits altitude, jumping altitude, and you go, what am I doing? I'm going to stay here. I'm good. I'm good. I could die when I jump out of that plane for absolutely no reason, right?
uh-huh.
Like if you're putting your life on the line for something that will further humanity, sure. But I'm doing this for Joel,
Yeah, yeah,
like, and you get to the door and you're looking down and you're going, oh, absolute, nope, nope. And you're like, I chose this. I like this. And especially when it's not your first time, you're like, I love this feeling, but your brain still goes,
yeah,
what are you doing?
yeah,
And then your tandem pushes you out and you have no choice but to lean into it. That's what it felt like, right? Like fundamentally, Warner was safe and it was good and it was cool, but n- since they pushed me out, I'm so excited. I'm re-energized. I have had, a lot more ideas. I see paths forward that
yeah.
aren't sort of like clocking in, making sure everything's set up for a release, going on to the next one, and it is truly wonderful.
Well, yeah. I mean, the jumping out the plane is the hard bit, and then
Mhm.
you pretty soon realize that the downside risk isn't really
Yeah,
that bad.
it's not that bad, that you've got a lot of safeties. I've been developing relationships and studying, the location-based experience industry for 8 years. I have never been so prepared to do something
Yeah,
in my life, and I know the people now, and again, the market's ready, right? Like,
yeah.
the another metaphor I use a lot is I started surfing during the pandemic, and I am a really, really bad surfer, but I
Not
can
as bad
catch
as
waves now. I love it. It's the best feeling in the world, and it's all about positioning and timing and reading the waves and responding to the ocean, and that's what the market's doing, and it does feel like right now we're positioned to catch the wave at the right time in a way that we weren't in 2018 or even in 2020.
yeah. And so how do you feel about the experiences industry specifically? Because it is its own kind of industry within an industry, right?
Totally.
What's your kind of take on it from now being fully immersed in it, if you'll
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, I think
Yes.
it's still really punk in a fun way, right? Like you've got a bunch of really creative, really visionary producers who are making really, really cool things like you meet Bum Bum Train or, Sleep No More or some of these the Nest is a great example that run the gamut of being shows made for two people that fundamentally do not have very much commercial value to hits like Sleep No More and Masquerade that were hugely expensive to produce and are on their way to making a lot of money to really incredible B2B experiences like Canva Create and all the beaches at Cannes Festival of Creativity, that are a different business proposition to again, now we're seeing really, really beautifully well done experiences in House of Kong, in Radiohead Motion Picture House, and ABBA Voyage. Like it's kind of all over the place. Like ABBA Voyage, I know everybody calls it an immersive experience. Like to me, that's a concert. It's new technology to deliver a classic concert experience. And I think people are looking for play and opportunity. I think a lot of the early 2000s were more about passive consumption, and people want to be engaged again, and people want to co-create. And I think the experiences industry is well positioned to deliver that, in a really great narrative way that you can't recreate at home. I think that's the greatest opportunity for our industry is, the Netflixes, and streaming platforms in general, and YouTube more broadly, have allowed good enough narrative consumption experiences,
Oh, yeah.
that people are spending their time doing, that it becomes a real question whether it is worth it to pay for something that is fundamentally the same experience if you watch a movie in a theater, or at home, right? But you can't get immersive experiences at home. You can't play games like Bridge Command at home, where you're really in it, where you're getting it. And Disneyland used to be for the people. It used to be designed for middle class families, and it too has become pretty out of reach for most people and families to go to regularly, let alone once, right? And I think there's a real desire for those sorts of opportunities. So I think,
I think I
as
think I think that there's a desire for those sorts of opportunities from the big players as well, right? So it's not just from
absolutely,
like the Disneys and the Universals are desperate to figure out how to stretch the tent, is the term I use, where it's kind of like you've got the big kind of moments, and how else can we kind of create other price points and ways into our universe, and
yeah.
immersive, like a really obvious way to do that.
100%. And on a macro level, also with the growing trends towards health and wellness, people don't want to just go out to eat. They're not drinking as much. They
Yeah.
don't want to sit still. You're sitting still all day. You want to get out and, get the wiggles out, move around, and sort of expand your imagination. I think that there is only upside right now for this industry to really take off and serve a real need, both from a pure entertainment perspective and a broader societal perspective. I think it solves problems for real estate owners and developers now that there is more flexibility for at home work, which, by the way, there should be. A lot of these companies, like, I'm a big believer in collaboration, and I think that in-person work is important, but I don't think anybody needs to be in an office
Uh,
5 times a week.
uh,
And most companies that are requiring it are not seeing increases in productivity. So then you've got all these spaces, and downtowns need people coming in to support the economies. And so there's a real there are real macro challenges that this industry can fulfill and can serve, but we need standards. We need standards in language. We need people to understand what they are buying a ticket for, or what they are going to,
yeah,
and how that exchange is delivered. And I think right now, you know, the abuse of the word immersive is highly problematic for everybody because nobody knows the expectations to set, and then you end up disappointed. It ends up ruining, things because everybody's talking on the internet. So I think that's part of it. That And we need hits, right? That's part of it as well. We need distribution, regular distribution where people know when they're going to the venue what it is, what they're getting, what the value exchange is,
yeah,
um, how much time to expect, how much interaction to expect. We just need, I obviously you want these things to be creative and unique and wonderful, but like the challenges of creative and unique and wonderful is it makes it harder to market, and
yeah,
communications are important, if you want to separate people from their hard-earned dollars, especially as we're heading into a likely recession.
yeah, yeah. On the one hand, it helps solve a kind of a cost of living problem by giving cheaper options than
Hmm.
the really expensive ones. But at the same
Yeah.
time, any recession means that discretionary spend of any kind is going to be under pressure. There was so much really interesting stuff that you said in there that I'm going to try and sort of pull bits out of to go deeper on. But it sounds like you said you think that the stage is set for the experience economy to boom, and it's a case of the sector needing to kind of professionalize a little bit or kind of grow up
Yeah.
a little bit, which is really interesting. Um, and yeah, because I think that expectation setting piece is really interesting, because it's like, um, on the one hand, the whole idea is to take people out of their comfort zone a little bit and
Yeah.
kind of put them in a world and whatever. But at the same time, it's often a really bad idea to take consumers completely out of their comfort zone, and they kind of need to know what they're buying and how big the box is and all this kind of stuff, right? So that's a really interesting problem that I've not really sort of heard articulated before, is that it's like, yeah, expectation setting around. It's almost like a sort of a category taxonomy, right? Of like, this is this kind of thing, that what happens inside you're not going to have seen before, but I can talk about this unit of experience
100%.
and you're going to kind of know what to expect, who to bring, what shoes to wear,
Yes.
all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and shout out to our good friends and partners at Brilliant Work, because they actually have a really great taxonomy of the types of experiences, the types of venues, and the types of guest flow that should be the initial parameters of discussion as producers and IP holders start to develop experiences. Yeah,
Yeah, it's important that everyone's working, because we're working on one as well, but only because it's not obvious that one already exists. So we'd rather be taught. We only want to do it so that we can talk in the same language as everyone else, right? So
yeah,
it's
exactly.
um all right. So I'm going to finish off with a few kind of quick questions. One of them that I always ask, you've sort of given what I think your answer would be there, which is that a bit of a pre-mortem on 10 years in the future, if the experience industry hasn't fulfilled its potential, what do you think the reasons are? And I think you've kind of covered that,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
Um, that it's kind of needs to get out of its own way a little bit.
yeah.
Um,
Inconsistent quality, a
yeah,
lack of clarity in conversations between producers and investors on what the expectations are on return. Um, I think those are going to be the two biggest ones if we are not reaching the sort of 1 trillion
yeah,
projected industry. And again, like, because we haven't better stratified, right now we talk about the experience industry, and McKinsey publishes this report that says it's going to be $1 trillion industry by 2030, but that throws everything from F1 and the Super Bowl together to stadium concerts to small venue concerts to location-based experiences, and I really do think that we need to separate them and be able to have economically sober conversations about the impact potentials and how we're measuring return, because the viewership of an F1 or of a televised opportunity, like live sport or live concerts, is infinitely scalable in a way that in real life human
mm,
responsive, truly immersive experiences are not, and how do we then treat the producers of those elements when the scalability may come from the narratives that they're licensing, but
yeah,
the narratives remain solely with the rights holders, even if they're expanded and then repackaged as film, TV, books, graphic novels, etc., which, I think it is the potential, it's sort of like this reflective opportunity, but the LBs themselves are limited in scalability by design. And that
yes,
doesn't reduce their value, but that does mean that funders need to understand what the potential is.
Yeah. Interesting. And so we're very nearly at the end of our time. So the last two questions are super straightforward, hopefully. The first is, if you were to be advising uh, young people starting out in the experience industry, or the music industry actually might be interesting as well, what would your main pearls of wisdom be for them?
Just dive in. So I actually teach Music Industry 110, the music business now at UCLA. So I fortunately get to interact with students and people aspiring to be in the music industry all the time. It's so the biggest thing that I will say if you want to be in either the location-based experiences industry or the music industry is learn the rights. Learn the rights. Learn the rights. It's great to say, "Oh, I've got this artist that has, 500 million followers or whatever on insert your platform of choice."
Mm,
But if you are not collecting revenue on the art that they are creating,
yeah,
you are not doing your job.
yeah,
Like, I'm sorry. And also it's so important if you want to build experiences to understand how the rights landscape is laid out, particularly now that that recorded music and publishing has become an asset class like any other
yeah,
commodity, and those are changing hands all the time. You will lose a lot of money if you invest in development before you have an understanding of everybody that has to sign off, because this is a very um, social pool,
mm, mm,
and it's very, very rarely going to be one rights holder for the sound recordings and one rights holder for the publishing. And you have to get permission from everybody.
yeah. The importance of IP in this industry is hard to overstate, really, and it's the biggest opportunity, but also can be a trap.
Totally. Especially as, stuff is evolving, but you have to understand that all the new rights are built on top of and not in place of all
Yeah,
the old rights,
yeah,
so understanding those fundamentals is really, really important. And then navigating, the newer classes of rights as they evolve is
yeah,
a huge opportunity.
yeah. Nice. And then final question, which I ask everybody is, who should I speak to next? So I'm trying to daisy chain
Ooh.
kind of
Ooh. Oh
conversation.
man. Okay, well if we're going on a rights, okay, there's two people I think.
Okay.
Neil Chakravarti, who is an investor based in Toronto that is pivoting from traditional media rights to immersive rights and has some strong opinions about the status of the industry as it is currently and how it could help grow up. So I think his voice in this conversation is really, really valuable, particularly to get a better understanding of how people with money and people who make money and people who make investments think about investing in different types. I think you probably heard he was on a panel that I moderated at Experience Week, and there are wild differences in perspectives on how money is deployed from venture capitalists versus private equity versus strategic investors versus angel investors. He comes at it from a private equity perspective, so I think he would be really valuable. And Oh man, I got tons of people. Diana Williams, I loved her. I loved her keynote about the flywheel, about the rights flywheel, and she built her career at Disney and Lucasfilm and whatever. So she comes from, a headspace perspective that's really valuable for this industry. Um, Vance Garrett built Disco Oasis, which is one of my favorite experiences of all time. So he gets an upvote. I could go on and on. There are so many
Yeah.
incredible, incredible, wonderful, creative people working in this industry, and you should talk to all of them.
Okay. Well, that's very generous with your recommendations there. So, all right. Well, listen, Alicia, it's been really great to chat, and hopefully enjoyed it as well. Got some value out of it. But
Absolutely.
yeah, until
Thank you.
next time.
All right. We'll talk soon. Thank you, Joe.
See ya.
Bye.